Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Today is Balarama Purnima. Balarama Purnima. It's full moon today. If you ever want to know, if you look at our holy days, you can check the last word. It'll tell you which day of the lunar cycle it is. So Krishna Janmashtami is on Ashtami. It's the middle day, halfway between the full and the new moon. And then you've got Nishringa Chaturdasi. That's on the 14th day, just one day before the full or the new moon. And you've got Purnima, that's the 15th day. I somehow never knew this until I became a devotee. But the moon gets bigger for 15 days and then smaller for 15 days. Somehow I just, for 20 years of my life or 15 years of my life, just never figured that one out. I feel somewhat stupid. Yeah, I guess, would probably be the right word, for never having noticed this. Have any of you not noticed this up till now? You didn't notice that? So the moon it gets bigger by 1 kala, by 1/15. The kala means a piece. And so by 1/15, the moon gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Then it's a full moon day. Then it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Then there's no moon, and backwards and forth. And the fortnight, the 2-week period, is the most natural unit of measurement that we have in our solar system. Obviously, there's day and night. That's pretty obvious and easy to get, day and night. But the week is totally artificial. We made that up. The week's a fake measurement of time. It's based on the Hebrew Bible with the 6 days, and then God rested on the 7th. That's where it comes from. But there's nothing in nature which would suggest the week is a natural line of demarcation. It's a natural way of keeping time. Day and night makes perfect sense. And then the next natural one you get after day and night is the lunar cycle, which is a fortnight, just 15 days. And 2 of those 15-day periods equal a month. So that's also natural. And then you got your 4 seasons, and then your 12 months, which make a full rotation, and you're back to where you started from. It's not a perfect system. The lunar calendar doesn't give you a perfect system. You end up having slightly different days every year. And so it got fixed. It got fixed in the Julian calendar initially. And then the Julian calendar was still off. And in the 15th, 16th century, it got fixed as the Gregorian calendar. And so now we have leap years. That's one of the little fancy footworks of the Gregorian calendar. And then every 100 years, there's no leap year. So there was no leap year in 2000. It should have been a leap year, but it wasn't, because if you don't do that, then you're off every century by a day. So the solar calendar and the way we do it with the Gregorian calendar allows you to keep the same calendar the whole year. But if you want to just look at what you would get if you were living somewhere and looking up in the sky, you're watching the sun grow bigger, then you're watching the sun grow smaller. You get 1 full lunar cycle, that's a month, 12 of those equal a year, and that's how we do our calendar. And so Balarama Purnima, Gaur Purnima, Purnima is the full moon day. Traditionally, Vaishnavas shave their face and their head on this day. And so normally you shave your face. If you're shaving your head, you shave your face and your head on the same day. Sometimes in South India, Vaishnavas also shave their armpits. And I'm talking about men, male devotees. I mean, women devotees can shave too, but it generally tends to make the stubble grow back. So you got to think carefully if you want to start shaving your face. In South India, men will also shave their chest, and they'll shave their underarms. Anybody from South? You seen this? You never looked. Very common. Brahmana men who serve as pujaris, will shave because they don't wear chuddars because it gets too hot. So they wrap their chudder around their waist, they go bare-chested, and they don't want to show their armpit hair to the deity when they're offering things, so they shave their armpits. Anyway, just a fun fact. Not looking to create a revolution here, just giving you guys a fun fact. So today is Balarama Purnima. Balaram is, and that's what we're going to try and answer today. Quick. Try and do it on the double quick. If we were going to start from scratch, we would start with the indisputable, obvious, self-evident reality that you are conscious. If you doubt whether you're conscious, guess what? You're conscious, because doubts are a feature of someone who has the prerequisite qualification of being conscious. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. You could even make it, I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am. It's not just accidental that became a... Philosophers will ideally try to start with nothing assumed so that you can follow them in their journey. And so that if you want to figure out what they figured out, you want to let them know? Let Roddy know. Thanks, man. They want to show you their footfalls, their footsteps, so that if you want to follow in their footsteps, it's easy because you don't have to have blind faith and assume things in order to understand where they're going. So ideally, they start with next to nothing. That's why the Greek philosophers were really into math, because it required no assumptions. You could just start with math, and then after starting with math, they would then extrapolate and philosophize off of that, and you would get to different places. Do you guys follow that? Who's under that mask? Oh, hey, good to see you. Good to see you. It's hard sometimes. You guys should all be wearing masks. Shame on you. But, it saves me from having to do weird, awkward stuff like ask who's under the mask. Ideally, you don't want to assume anything. So, they would start with math and then extrapolate from there and philosophize from there. So that anybody who wanted to figure out whether Pythagoras was onto something or what have you, they could look at their math and then they would start to extrapolate from there and come up with various ideas about the nature of the world. Aristotle did the same thing. There's other ways to go about it. You can do pure logical arguments, which are based on propositional logic, and you have very, very few rules. The law of the excluded middle, something can't be itself and its opposite in the same way at the same time. There's a few things like that you have to accept as premises, but other than that, with propositional logic, you can really quickly, force somebody to see what you're talking about if you get your premises right. So there's sort of two things you can do. You either try to go with pure logic, where something can't but be true. If all men are mortal, and if Socrates is a man, then Socrates must be mortal because all men are mortal, and Socrates is a man, and therefore he must be mortal. And that's a solid, sound argument. It can't but be true, and the premises automatically lead to the conclusion. The other way to do things, did you guys follow that? I'm doubting it, but I'm just gonna keep going. The other way to do things is you look at the natural world around you and you see what you can see and you figure things out from there. That's the Immanuel Kant style. That's the cogito ergo sum style. That's the I think therefore I am style. So you are conscious, can't deny it. Consciousness cannot be materially derived. That's why we can't make life from chemicals. That's why we haven't answered the hard problem of consciousness, why we are conscious, why is this 3D, full-time, Technicolor, filled with sensual experiences, movie with a voiceover playing in your head all the time. Chemicals don't have that. Certainly isn't needed for the world to operate, but somehow we have it. Where does that come from? If you want to prove that consciousness is chemically derived, then the burden of proof is on you. Because the default position is that consciousness and matter are distinct. It's very easy to see a difference between a person and a chair. If you want to say they're the same, you're welcome to, but you got to pony up. Just like if somebody wants to tell you God exists, they got to give some evidence for their argument. Because you don't just walk outside and see God in front of you self-evidently, incorrigibly, and empirically verifiably. So it's always important to figure out where the burden of proof lies. In terms of consciousness, the burden of proof lies on the consciousness denier or the person who wants to argue that consciousness can be materially derived. Once you get to consciousness, now your Big Bang Theory, your source of all reality, however you conceive of it, has to include consciousness, which has become a basic quantum feature of reality. Because consciousness is not a secondary feature made up of primary features, like molecules are made up of atoms, and atoms are made up of subatomic particles, and they're made up of neutrinos and gluons and bosons. But once you get down to that subatomic particle level, there's nothing smaller, and that's your basic unit of measurement. So once you figure out that consciousness can't be materially derived, it's now a basic unit of measurement, and your Big Bang Theory, your explanation of where everything comes from, has to now include consciousness as a basic feature. And what is a conscious source of all reality? That's God. And so that's a little bit of logic mixed with a little bit of, I don't know, phenomenology, a little bit of exploration of the world in which you live. Did you guys follow that? Now we're the conscious source of all reality, and then the next big question, and I'm not expecting to have solved the theism-atheism debate for all time in the first 5 minutes of my class on a different subject. Obviously, it's like a tennis match. You hit the ball, and then you're expecting somebody to hit it back, and then you're going to corner them and win the game. It's not, you got to be able to do more than just make a good opening. You got to be able to volley back and forth and anticipate the counters that might be made and come up with good arguments against them. But this core argument works today, 2021, in contemporary philosophical journals. It's the core of theistic arguments on the cutting edge of philosophy. If you don't trust me, then come and see me after class, and we can battle it out. And then you can also bring your friends. If you got like a smart friend, I can do battle with them too. You can have your if you need a champion, like a knight to champion you, then I'll deal with them too. It's a solid core argument. So the next natural question, once you've accepted that God exists, is, what's God like? That's the next natural question. Just very briefly, one of the big problems you have to overcome if you want to argue for an all-good God is, why isn't God also all evil? Why isn't God all filled with suffering and cruelty? Because you see those things exist in the world. It's called a dystheistic conception of divinity. So you got to argue for that, because if God's the source of all good things, then wouldn't he also be the source of all bad things? You follow? So you got to wrestle with that one, so you don't come up with a dystheistic notion. I would argue that human beings were designed to know God because we have the power of thought that we don't find in any animal. We have recursion in our language. We're capable of plumbing the depths of the universe and thinking about the most amazing things ever. That's why we're apex predators, even though we're one of the weakest animals on the planet. We don't have any kind of, our nails are not what are you going to do with your nails? You hurt yourself. If you try to claw somebody, you're just going to hurt yourself. You're going to tear your nail and get hurt. Our teeth, we have the teeth of an herbivore. This whole thing, you can't eat meat with this unless you cook it and like cut it up with utensils and do all that stuff. But this whole disjointed, unfixed jaw, that's for chewing, like grains, cud, stuff like that. I don't even know what cud is, but anyway. I read it in the book when I was a kid. That's for chewing cud, whatever that is. And so we got no teeth. I mean, like, an average omnivore that gets 90+% of its diet from meat, from vegetables, and less than 10% of its diet from meat, an average omnivore is a bear. Look at a bear's bite strength, their fixed jaw, and their claws, and you can see the difference between even, your average omnivore and ourselves. Anyway. No, I was wondering what the vehicle was. I was just, the sound outside got me going. I didn't lose my place, but thank you. If you look at us, what were we designed to do? We were designed to think. We have these massive encephalized brains, and we're apex predators despite being incredibly weak. And we ask huge metacognitive questions like, who am I and why am I here and what's the purpose of life? And we have, all the attendant mental problems and all sorts of things. It comes from just thinking way too much for our own good sometimes. But there's also some good that comes out of that. We were made to think. And so I would argue, what's up, Katie? Is that Carla? Good to see you. We were designed to think. And so I would argue, I am arguing, and I don't want to get too caught in the weeds on this, but I'm arguing that human beings were designed to think about God. Therefore, we are theomorphic, designed in the image of God. And therefore, when you look at human society and you find out what makes human society thrive, cooperation, kindness, compassion, selflessness, all the things that bring out the best in a group of people, those things come from God. When you look at what's most sustainable in our society. I'm trying to get rid of the law of the jungle thing that goes on in the animal kingdom by saying that we are more theomorphic and animals are less theomorphic. And therefore, when you look at us and what sustains human civilization, you then find out what comes from God because you're finding out what's most sustainable, and our Creator would be aligned with what is most sustainable and what is most solid and what is most fixed, being the ultimate fixed point of the universe. Do you guys follow where I'm headed? And you can go, it's another tennis match. It's actually a slightly more involved tennis match. Easier to argue for God's existence than to argue for an all-good deity. By the way. It's not really more difficult, it's just, it takes longer. There's a lot more room for back and forth. I still think it's a solid argument. There's a lot more room for back and forth. So now you've got this all-good deity. Did you follow that? All right. And what's the ultimate manifestation of goodness? Love. Therefore, ultimately, you good? Is he bugging you? No? Everything cool? All right. And so now we've got an all-good deity. And what's the ultimate manifestation of goodness? Love. Krishna is really, if you think about it, Krishna is a transcendental Cupid. Krishna's the ultimate seductive lover, and he's the source of the universe. Krishna has, practically speaking, no overt power. He doesn't even have the four arms that let you know that you're in the presence of divinity that many deities have in the Hindu pantheon. And every deity has a weapon. Some deities have dozens of weapons. Kali has dozens of weapons. It's a sheer power move. She's subversive. She's a black woman standing on the corpse of her husband. It's totally subversive. And she's wearing, fetuses for earrings. Look at the iconography sometime. And she's got a skirt made out of human arms. Have you seen this? And then her devotees' skulls are on her necklace. So she's like really, an equal opportunity sadist. But, what's Krishna got, weapon-wise? He's got a chakra, but we're not really into Krishna with a chakra. That's another conversation for another day. But we're into Krishna with a flute. He's like the Pied Piper. He's like Pan. He's Cupid, playing on his flute, seducing everybody with his beauty, with his sweetness, with his charm, with his wonderful personal qualities. If you really want to get down to brass tacks and the basics, our theology is about conceiving of God as supremely powerful, and that power becomes overwhelmed by supreme goodness. And Krishna's beauty and sweetness are the most attractive, ultimately powerful features of his persona, which seduce and beguile and intrigue the universe and create the possibility of an intimate relationship with God where you can dance with the divine. Literally. Now, if Krishna's about love requires a lover and a beloved. Love binds two distinct entities together and makes them one. If there's no mother and child, there's no love between them. Self-love, devoid of the capacity to love others, is called narcissism. Thank you for hanging out, Shri Prabhu. Have a lovely night.
Thank you. I was up late.
Prabhu, let's give him a round of applause. Our dearest friend, Shri Prabhu, gets up at midnight every day, stayed up super late tonight to hang out with us. He's going to go chant 64 rounds at midnight while we're still cleaning the temple, because that's how he rolls. Krishna is the possibility of an intimate, loving relationship with the divine. If you really just kind of boil it down and streamline it without the bells and whistles of our tradition that might be considered arbitrary, and you were to just look at the essence of what our tradition is trying to communicate, it's that love beats power. Mercy beats justice. And love always requires a second. There's a lover and a beloved, and love is that force that takes two and makes them one. Without mushing those two. Sometimes you make two into one and you homogenize things, and then you're left with a bunch of mush. Like if you take the child and the mother and then you mush them together, that sounds horrible. That sounds awful. We want to be able to merge without mushing. We want to be able to unite in love and still retain our individuality so that that love can exist in perpetuity. Otherwise, love is only an intermediate emotion that ultimately gives rise to something else. But for love to exist in perpetuity, individuality must exist in perpetuity. Do you guys follow this? Okay, so Krishna naturally wants to love. And so who does Krishna love? He loves all of us. Sure, that's why we were created. We are the love children of God. We're the love children of God's hermaphroditic union with himself. God is both the male and female source of all reality. That's why masculinity and femininity exist in this world. You really want to say, look at this world and see the best stuff in this world and you'll find something about divinity? How can you get around the idea of looking at divinity in male and female terms, considering that those things are all pervasive in every species of life, practically speaking? You follow? By the same logic, by the same logic, they're my elders, so I can't be like, shh. By the same logic, that consciousness means the source must have consciousness. The masculine and feminine is a real challenge to a neuter conception of divinity as being the apex. Anyway, so we are the loved children of Krishna, who's both the Mahat Yoni, the great womb of the universe, and Dadami Garbham. He's also the seed giver. He's the Mata and the Pitta of the universe, as stated in the Gita. Krishna makes this point. Mama Yoni, my womb. Mahat Brahma is the great Brahman. Tasmin Garbham Dadam Yaham. And in that I place the seed. So Krishna claims both the masculine and feminine. And we are the children of that. And we exist. And then Krishna can love us and we can love Krishna. You want to know what to get for the person who has everything? Give them love. Because nobody can have everything. Because they can't have your love unless you give it to them. Love depends on free will. Free will means you have the power to choose what you want to do with your free will. If you choose to give Krishna your love, that's truly a gift that the person that has everything doesn't have. We exist so the potential for love lives forever. Krishna loves us, we can love Krishna back. Also, if you aren't affected by somebody's love, then you are a sociopath. Sometimes we think of being aloof and transcendental as like the more aloof you are, the better. But then you end up being some sort of callous automaton or some sort of sociopath or robot, and that's your conception of divinity. In which case, when you start to mold yourself into the image of your deity, you become super cruel and super callous and super uncaring about other people. Love requires relativity. Love requires relativity and vulnerability. A deity who isn't vulnerable and isn't affected by you would be incapable of love. At least any kind of deep love. You could argue that there's like a minimal sort of love with absolutely no possibility of reciprocation. It means nothing to me what you do. I don't care at all. There's nothing you can do that will ever affect me. You could maybe call that some kind of pity-esque type love. But some sort of empathetic, compassionate love requires relativity. The very word compassion and empathy and sympathy denote that you are entering into a relationship with the other person where you feel with them, you feel into them. Do you guys follow this? There's no empathy if you don't feel like into the other person's feelings. So now your all-good deity is all-loving. Your all-loving deity needs two. That individuality has to exist in perpetuity. Therefore, we're all souls existing in perpetuity. So the potential of love stays alive. It isn't just an intermediate emotion, an intermediary stepping stone to some sort of sociopathic, callous, robotic love. You guys following this? And that all-good deity also has to be vulnerable and accessible and intimately available and relative in many ways. And also absolute. You follow? A full conception of divinity would have both. The supreme absolute and the supreme relative. This is Krishna. And so Krishna has to have people he loves. And he creates all of us beyond space and time, so we exist eternally. But Krishna also has what you might call primary evolutes. What we oftentimes call avatars, incorrectly. Ava means down, and tar means to cross. So an avatar is something which crosses from above to below. It represents a theophanic or an incarnation of divinity in this world. Do you guys follow this? We're saying that up in the spiritual realm, shh, hey! He's pointing at me. I know it's like sometimes you think like if you leave the movie theater you can just start screaming bloody murder and no one inside can hear you, like there's a cone of silence and you've stepped outside that cone of silence. So just to get where we're going again, one more time, you're conscious. Consciousness doesn't come from chemicals. Therefore the source of the universe must also be conscious. Must have that consciousness. What's the nature of that consciousness? It's good, it's loving. Loving means it's vulnerable. And loving means there's got to be two forever. That's why we exist. And Krishna also has primary evolutes. Balaram, you could say, is Krishna's first evolute. Balaram is Krishna, but he's white. Krishna's black. We sometimes say Krishna's blue, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the word Krishna in Sanskrit, its primary meaning, if you get that Sanskrit dictionary, the word Krishna in Sanskrit means black. That's what the word means. And so Krishna is black and beautiful. Sometimes we say Ganasham, dark like a rain cloud. I don't think that rain clouds are particularly blue. I've been in India during the monsoon season. I looked up in the sky thinking, are the clouds blue in India? Have I been missing all this time? They're not. They're like kind of a dark, beautiful, luminescent gray color. An effulgent, dark, gray, beautiful color. Of course, Krishna is the source of the colors in this world, not vice versa. And so when you say Krishna is this color or that color, it's really that color in the world is related to or derivative of Krishna, who's the origin of everything. Did you guys follow that? That's a little mind twister for you. Balaram is white. Krishna is black. Balaram wears blue. Krishna wears yellow. Balaram carries a plow. Krishna carries a flute. Our conception, and when Krishna and Balaram embraces Krishna regularly, he's Krishna's elder brother. He has parental feelings of affection towards Krishna. There's another point that I got to make in the 3 minutes I have left. I just got a lot of time left, so I got to figure out some way to kill time. Ultimately, love requires you to get rid of hegemonies. You got to get rid of power differentials between people. If somebody has too much power over you, you can't but be faithful to them. You're scared of them. You can't get around it. And so if you really want to love Krishna and embrace him, you have to forget he's God. Like if somebody who held the fate of your soul in the palm of their hand was like, come here and give me a hug, you'd be like, Master, please be kind to me, be merciful. It's called a beatific moment. If you read Paradisio and stuff like that, if you read Christian literature, it talks about heaven. There's these, amazing moments where you see the divinity and you feel like you fall at the ground, at the feet of divinity in supplication. You feel yourself to be very small and God to be very great. Thank you. And so, if Krishna said, come here and give me a kiss, give me a hug, it'd be very difficult to do that with full enthusiasm. So you have to forget Krishna's God if you really want to love him. And so everybody in heaven, in our little corner of heaven that we want to go to, doesn't know Krishna's God. They think Krishna's their friend or their child. We go so subversive, like it's even way heavier than the whole conception of Kali I introduced. We get so subversive. Just take it from her and just pat her on the head or something like that. Thank you. Work with me, guys. I got 6 kids. I know what it's like. Where was I? Yeah. We go so far that normally you think God's my mother and my father. We think God is my son, my child. We want to love God, not ask for anything in return. So we take it a step further. We say you should love God as your child. So we worship Krishna as a little child. So that we never ask for anything. It's not some weird baby Jesus cult from St. Louis or something like that. My family's from St. Louis. I'm allowed to hate on St. Louis. It's my birthright. It's not like that. We want to love Krishna and ask for nothing. We think of Krishna as our child, and we want to... Yashoda suckles Krishna. Krishna drinks breast milk from Yashoda's breast in heaven. Just think about that one. Here's another one. if that didn't happen in heaven, there'd be a deficiency in heaven. If there wasn't somebody in heaven who loved God enough that they wanted to feed God from their breast and suckle Krishna and put him to sleep and wake him up, they didn't love him with that much intensity, there'd be a deficiency in heaven. There'd be a type of love in this world that doesn't exist up there. A beautiful love in this world that doesn't exist up there. So we worship Krishna as a child. Sometimes we think of ourselves as the parents. Krishna as a child. Or we think of Krishna as our equal, and that equal has two flavors, friendship and romance. Equalness can either be romantic. Did I just kill it?
No.
Or it can be platonic. If it's platonic, it's fraternal. That's Balaram and the Cowherd Boys. Krishna's best friend in the whole wide world. He is Krishna, but he's white, wearing a blue dhoti. Otherwise, he's Krishna Samana. Krishna Varna Matra Bhed. There's only one difference. The color is different. Shaba ar Saman. Krishna ar Saman. Otherwise, he's completely the same as Krishna. He's the first evolute. He's God as a counterform. And the moment Balaram exists, the idea of loving Krishna exists. Because as soon as there's two, love can unite them. And so with the birth of Balaram, you have the birth of Krishna Bhakti, the birth of love for Krishna, the birth of love for the deity, the birth of the possibility of a relationship based on love and servitude between the soul and God, because Balaram, once he exists and there's two instead of one, then Bhakti exists. Do you guys follow this? Therefore, Balaram is all of our fathers. He's the father of all of us. In a lot of ways, you could say we come from Balaram. We are evolutes of Balaram, imbued with the same potential for loving Krishna that Balaram has. Balaram embraces Krishna. When Balaram embraces Krishna, it looks like a conch shell has a blue sapphire sitting inside of it. When Krishna and Balaram embrace, Balaram, who's got the complexion of crystal, and Krishna has the complexion of a blue sapphire, they merge together and you can't figure out which one's which, and Yashoda gets confused and she mistakes Balaram for Krishna and Krishna for Balaram. Is Braj Kamud here? No. Braj Kamud is I don't know, is he what is it, PhD candidate? What's he doing? He's working? What's he doing? Huh?
He's working now.
He's working, he's got a master's in some fancy subject. What's the subject?
Software engineering.
Yeah, like every other Indian guy in the U.S. From USC, though. He's no joke. So he came to see me yesterday, and he said to me, Tukaram, I want to have an intimate relationship with you. I want to be intimately united with you. He said this to me. Which sounds like a little racy, you know? It sounds a little racy to like an American set of ears. It's not exactly the way it's not like the exact kind of idiomatic phraseology that we have when we're talking to our friends, our platonic friends. You know? You were there, right? Were you there when he said this? Am I making this up? He said exactly that to me. You were kind of stunned, right? I want to be intimately united with you, right? And I was just like, yes, I want to be intimately united with you also. Because I lived many years in India, so I go for a walk with another man, hold hands, no problem. I'm cool like that. I'm metro like that. I spent a lot of years living in India, and I'm okay with the Indian cultural expressions of filial affection. Krishna and Balaram love each other like that. Intimately united. Friendship and romantic love for Krishna are very, very similar. They're based on equality. They're based on mutual reciprocity. Krishna and Balaram, you could say, for all intents and purposes, are in love with each other. And Balaram's got the upper hand. Balaram wants to love Krishna so much, he manifested as his older brother. There's a whole little thing there. Lakshman and Ram Lakshman was Ram's younger brother, so he had to defer to Ram, and he was fried about it. So he said, next time we come, I'm going to be your older brother. That way I can love you to my heart's content. And so Balaram is older than Krishna. And so Balaram sometimes will wake up in the middle of the night in heaven and jump out of bed and start running for the door because he had a dream that Krishna was being attacked. And he's so filled with a protective older brother, paternal, filial love for Krishna. The sweetest of parental affection mixed with the sweetest of friendship. That he'll wake up and leap out of bed and start running for the door. And then realize, okay, it was just a dream. When Balaram and Krishna play, Balaram wins. Like when they fight, they wrestle, Balaram wins. Balaram wrestles with God and wins. When he gets tired, Krishna rubs his feet. If you can wrap your head around suckling Krishna from your breast, loving Krishna so much, imagine loving Krishna so much and being so close to him that you let him give you a foot rub. And if you want to take a nap, you lay down on Krishna's lap and he becomes your pillow. Balaram will take a nap and Krishna will sit there motionless and be his pillow. Sometimes Balaram wants to dance and Krishna will play a flute and Balaram will dance. Sometimes Krishna wants to dance and so Balaram will sing and Krishna will dance. And the Supreme Lord disports himself on equal terms with his primary angels forever in a corner of heaven where love reigns supreme and you can intimately love God to your heart's content beyond what you ever might have thought was possible in a power-based relationship. And Balaram is like the king of that universe. And by his grace, that door gets open and we see these loving relationships, and sometimes a desire awakens and you think, that's a beautiful idea. Falling madly in love with God is a beautiful idea. I didn't quite follow everything Sukha said, but that thing I got, falling in love with God, is a great idea. And that's the beginning of your journey. That appreciation that such a thing could exist, might exist. It starts you down that road of thinking through it, double checking your math, resolving your doubts, and making it yours. One time, Krishna and Balaram were playing, and they're just like two brothers. So Balaram they'll separate the cowherd boys into teams. They'll say, let's have a wrestling match. It'll be I just watched this Russian thing on YouTube where it was 50 men on either side, and they fought. It was ridiculous. You ever see those? Yeah. It's like only in Russia, right? It's crazy, right? You're like, no, they're not going to do it. No, come on. And they're like 8, 7, 6, 5. You're like, come on, really? And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, they did it. They do it in Italy too. Krishna and Balaram decided to have a group wrestling match. So they divided up into teams. And Balaram's Gopas, they're super loyal to Balaram. They're like, yeah, we want to be on Balaram's team. You'd think everybody would be, I want to be on Krishna's team, but it's not like that. We want to be on Balaram's team. Balaram has his own gopis. They're not into Krishna. They're into Balaram. Bala means strength, because Balaram always ends up displaying some extraordinary strength in his pastimes. And Ram means pleasure. And so Balaram really, the devotees fall in love with Balaram and his loving feeling towards Krishna. So that's what the name Balaram means. That's why he's given the name Balaram. So they divide up into two teams. And Balaram's, Hare Krishna Adya Prabhu, would you like a chair? Are you sure? Okay, Prabhu. Balaram's devotees, they were like, we want to be on Balaram's team. And they fought with Krishna's team, and they won. And then the rules are the loser has to give a piggyback ride to the winner. you follow this? So there was this demon called Pralamba. Pralamba means deceitful. Lamba means deceit. Pralamba means like super deceitful. Lamba literally means bent. So, Pralambasur, he had carried Balaram on his shoulders. And he thought, I'll take Balaram away and I'll kill him. And I'll come back and kill Krishna. This gets into the intrigue and the excitement that's always abounding in Vrindavan, which I'm not going to bother discussing. But anyway, he started to take Balaram away. And Balaram said, hey, Krishna, look at this guy. Can you believe what he's doing? He called Krishna Manoram. Manoram means one who satisfies your mind. And he called him Manohar, one who steals your mind away. He says, this guy is Manohar because he's insane because he thinks he's going to be able to beat me. And then Krishna said, yeah, you go ahead and finish him. So Balaram just hit him on the head. And Pralamba was like this big monster demon. Balaram's like a little boy. You know, big things come in little packages. So Balaram, like a diamond ring, you know, with a little package, just banged him on the head. Pralamba started bleeding profusely. It was a whole scene. It's described, it was like watching the sunset in Vrindavan. Like the red, you know, when the sun sets, it's like red. So as he was falling to the ground. And then Balaram was sitting on top of his shoulders, because he was riding on his shoulders. And it looked like the moon, the full moon in the sky. Do you follow this? So the sun was setting, but simultaneously, there was a full moon in the sky. Anyway, Pralamba represents lust and deceit and cheating. And so Balarama, as our guru, by killing that demon, also gives us strength that we can deal with those things in our own life. We can't do it all on our own. You can do a lot on your own, a lot more than you're currently doing. Ishwarji, very nice to see you. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
It's really nice to see devotees coming out in a post-COVID world for the program. There's a lot more than we can do sometimes when we want to. Sometimes we're like, I've got some immaterial desires. I prayed to Krishna, they didn't go away. They're not supposed to go away. You're supposed to work on them. That's your job. You got a lot of work to do. But if you do your full effort, it's still not quite enough. But that sincerity attracts Krishna and Balaram's mercy, and they jump in, and through divine grace, they're the finishing touch. So today is Balaram Purnima, especially for devotees who love Krishna in a fraternal relationship. Today is like the best day of the year. But for all devotees, Balaram represents Guru, he represents bhakti, he represents the possibility of divine love, he's why individual souls exist, he's part of that original, what do I want to say, he's the opening stanza of the symphony of Krishna's love becoming all-pervasive throughout the universe. Because he's what happens at the beginning. And it sets the tone for everything that comes afterwards. And so through Balaram's pastimes, his love for Krishna, we can trace our own love for Krishna in whatever form it might manifest. All right, that's it. So we'll do a little kirtan, and then we've got a nice meal for all of you. Thank you so very much for coming. Hari Hari Bol. Shri Balaram Purnima ki. Shri Balaram Jayanti ki. Shri Baladev ki.